Imagine waking up, right, in a perfectly quiet room.
Like a total sensory deprivation tank kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And you have absolutely no memory of how you got there. But strangely, you don't feel any panic at all.
Which is pretty unusual for the human brain.
Right. In fact, you feel this overwhelming, really profound sense of peace. You look down, but you can't quite perceive a physical body.
Okay.
And as you sit there in this state of, like, pure awareness, you realize something really fundamental is missing.
And it's not what you'd expect, I'm guessing?
No, it's not your memory. It's not your intelligence. What's missing is the deeply ingrained, constant humming background noise of your gender.
Wow.
You don't feel male.
Yeah.
You don't feel female. You don't feel anything in between. You are simply entirely pure observation.
I mean, it sounds like a thought experiment, right? Like something designed for a modern philosophy classroom, a complete shedding of the self. But the reality is far more compelling than just, a hypothetical scenario. This is an actual, documented, deeply studied psychological state that practitioners have been reporting for millennia.
And that is exactly the part that completely hooked me. For thousands of years, across wildly different cultures and eras, individuals who enter profound states of meditation or trance report this exact same sensation.
Yeah, a complete and total absence of gender identity.
Right. And I want to be incredibly clear right up front for everyone listening. This deep dive is not a modern socio-political commentary.
A very important distinction to make.
Yeah, we are not engaging in the cultural debates we have today regarding gender roles or, societal structures.
Right.
What we are looking at is a deeply rooted historical, phenomenological, and honestly neurological reported experience.
We are essentially examining a structural experience of the human mind. The premise here is that when the mind shifts gears into these really profound depths, something fundamental changes in its very architecture.
Like the actual wiring.
Exactly. It alters how it processes reality, how it constructs a sense of self, and how it interacts with the whole concept of form.
And that is the exact mission we are embarking on today. We have a fascinating stack of source material, specifically focusing on excerpts from the text called Beyond Gender, the Formless Mind in Meditation.
It's a really dense, brilliant text.
It really is. So our goal for this deep dive is to impartially analyze the mechanics of the mind based on these sources. We are going to explore exactly why and how the deep mind sheds the concept of gender and what this incredibly specific phenomenon reveals about, well, the nature of human consciousness itself.
And to set the tone for you as we begin, we must look at this purely through the lens of mental architecture. Think of it like examining the blueprints of a highly complex machine.
Okay.
The text makes a very sharp, deliberate distinction between the physical body and the state of the mind. We are essentially stepping into the control room of consciousness to see what happens when the signals from the physical body are temporarily, muted.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can understand why gender disappears in deep meditation, we have to understand what gender actually is to the mind.
Right, at least according to the framework of this specific source material.
Exactly. I mean, we use the word gender every single day, but how does this text define it operationally?
Well, if we're looking at the architecture of the mind, the text argues something very specific and honestly somewhat counterintuitive.
Which is?
That gender does not actually reside in the mind itself.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it resides in what the text calls the aggregate of form. And in practical terms, that just means the physical body.
Oh, wow. So it's categorized as a bodily convention, not a mental absolute.
Precisely. The framework suggests that gender is given meaning by perception, or what is historically called jhāna in the early texts.
Okay.
Right. Perception is the mind's labeling system. It's the faculty that recognizes, categorizes, and remembers. To really understand this, we need to break down the microseconds of how perception actually operates.
Break it down for me.
So, when the eye sees a shape, or the ear hears a voice, the mind doesn't just, register raw data. In a fraction of a millisecond, it searches its vast archive of past experiences, social conditioning, biological patterns.
Right.
It finds a match, it applies a label. That process, that labeling, is jhāna.
It's like the ultimate mental filing cabinet. The raw data comes in, and the mind just frantically scrambles to put it in a folder labeled man, woman, threat, friend, and so on.
That mechanism is absolutely crucial. Because of this rapid filing system, the text posits that gender is the known. It is the object being observed and categorized.
Oh, okay.
It is not the knower.
The known, not the knower. That instantly creates a separation between the observer and the observed, doesn't it?
It does, a massive separation.
The mind is the thing doing the looking, and the gender identity is just the thing being looked at.
Exactly. The mind acts as the mirror, and gender is merely the reflection cast upon it, as long as the mind relies on the physical body as its base.
Meaning receiving all those sensory signals.
That's great. As long as it's doing that, this perception of male or female operates. It runs constantly in the background. And alongside it, a very subtle conceit, this underlying sense of I am, hides quietly right beneath the surface.
So it's the leap from there's a female form over to I am a female.
Precisely. It personalizes the data.
Let me try to mount this onto a modern analogy to see if I'm grasping the actual mechanics here.
Be for it.
Think about a computer system. Your physical body is the hardware. Gender identity is a software program, right? The perception software running on that hardware.
I like that.
And what this text seems to be saying is that the core operating system, the pure awareness, doesn't inherently contain that specific software. It just runs the program because it's currently connected to that specific hardware.
The software analogy gets us started, but we actually have to push it further because the operating system itself is fundamentally altered in the states the text describes.
Altered how?
Well, during deep meditation, these profound states, often referred to as jhāna, the mind entirely withdraws from the physical form. The text talks about the mind being secluded from sensual pleasures.
Okay. Secluded.
But it is critical to clarify that this does not mean physically running away to a cave or, developing a hatred for the world.
Right. It's not a physical retreat. It's not about hiding away from society in a cabin somewhere.
No, it is a purely internal mechanical shift. Secluded in this context means the mind temporarily ceases to rely on bodily conventions altogether.
Oh, I see.
The sensory inputs, so sight, sound, touch, and all the complex mental concepts tied directly to them, they are systematically dialed down.
So returning to my analogy, it's not just that the hardware goes to sleep.
Right.
The operating system literally stops looking for inputs from the external ports.
Exactly. And without the base of the physical body providing that constant feedback, the concept of gender literally has nowhere to stand within the mental architecture.
Because it needs the body to exist.
It requires a physical form to reference, to compare, to categorize. Without the active processing of form, the perception of gender simply cannot manifest.
That makes perfect logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the text goes significantly deeper into the why of this, doesn't it?
Oh, much deeper.
Because it's not just a matter of the sensory ports being closed. It has to do with the actual nature of the mind's focus in that deep state. The text describes the objects of focus in a really specific way.
It does. The mechanics of deep meditation require the mind to focus on incredibly refined, unified objects. By contrast, the text describes gender as a coarse object.
Coarse. Okay, when we use that word in everyday language, we mean rough, right? Like sandpaper or just unrefined. How does the text mean it?
Coarse, in this phenomenological framework, means it is highly complex, dense, and requires a massive amount of cognitive machinery to even exist.
Give me an example of that machinery.
Consider what is structurally required for the concept of gender to exist in your mind at any given moment. It requires comparison. You must subconsciously compare your form and behavior to others constantly. It requires the active labeling of sana that we just discussed, and it requires ego, that heavy conceit of I am this. All of that involves heavy, complicated, multi-layered mental processing.
It takes a huge amount of mental RAM just to maintain the baseline feeling of who you are.
A tremendous amount. But as the mind enters jhana, it achieves a state called one-pointedness.
One-pointedness, meaning singular focus.
Singular focus. The mind becomes entirely singular, refined, and incredibly still. It locks onto a single, simple reality.
Like what?
Like the breath, or a feeling of universal loving kindness, or even just the concept of infinite space.
Okay.
In that state of singular, laser-like focus, coarse elements simply cannot enter the mind stream. They are too bulky, too loud, and too complex to exist in a space of complete singularity.
This is a really crucial distinction, I think, because it means the meditator isn't going into a trance and violently fighting off their gender identity.
No, not
They aren't sitting on a cushion, clenching their jaw, repeating, I am nothing, I have no gender, I am a formless void.
Doing that would completely defeat the purpose. Actively rejecting an identity requires the use of ego and comparison.
Right. You're still actively engaging with the concept, just in a negative way.
Exactly. You're still trapped in the machinery. The mechanism here is much simpler and honestly more elegant. Gender isn't violently erased or suppressed. It merely fails to load.
Fails to load. I love that.
The environmental conditions required for it to appear in the mind are simply absent.
I really want you, listening to this right now, to just imagine the sheer relief of this state for a moment.
It's hard to even fathom for most of us.
It really is. Think about how much of your daily mental energy, from the literal moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep, is spent navigating the physical and social world through the lens of your specific identity.
Yeah, it's constant.
The constant heavy background processing of comparing yourself to the rest of the world, wondering how you are perceived, modulating your behavior to fit within the bounds of a label, defending that label when it's challenged.
It is exhausting work.
To have all that heavy machinery just power down.
Yeah.
Not suppressed through willpower, but truly structurally turned off because your mind has moved to a place where those complex concepts simply do not fit. It sounds like an unimaginable psychological liberation.
The source texts consistently describe it as exactly that, a profound, unburdening relief. And what makes this deep dive so compelling is that this isn't just an abstract, theoretical concept debated by scholars in a vacuum.
Right, they're practical examples.
The text illustrates this exact mental architecture being tested under extreme psychological pressure. It provides a historical anecdote that shows this specific mechanism in action.
This is hands down the most gripping part of the source material for me.
It's quite dramatic.
We are going to travel way back in time to ancient India to see how this specific psychological phenomenon plays out when it is aggressively challenged. We're talking about the story of Bhikkhuni Soma.
Yes. Bhikkhuni Soma was a female monastic, and her story is preserved in the Therigatha, which is a remarkable historical collection of verses from early Buddhist nuns.
Really incredible texts.
To understand the weight of this story, we have to really set the scene. Ancient India was a highly stratified, deeply patriarchal society where identity, caste, and gender dictated absolutely every single aspect of a person's existence.
You couldn't escape it.
No. In this context, Soma is deep in meditation, resting in the very state of mind we just analyzed, where the mind is secluded from form, enjoying that one-pointed stillness.
Completely dialed in.
Right. And while she's resting in this architecture, she is visited by a figure known as Mara.
Let's clarify Mara for the listener real quick, because often in casual translations, Mara is depicted as a literal demon with horns, right?
Yeah.
Like a physical monster.
Right, a mythological villain.
But in the context of this psychological framework, Mara is something much more insidious. It's the personification of illusion, temptation, and the ego's desperately deeply ingrained survival instinct.
Exactly. Mara represents the internal voice of doubt. He is the tempter that constantly tries to pull the practitioner's mind back into the tangled web of suffering, comparison, and confusion.
He wants you back in the mud.
He relies on the mind attaching to things. So, Mara approaches Bhikkhuni Soma while she is perfectly concentrated and delivers a highly specific, cutting insult.
What does he say?
He whispers to her, "How can a woman with only 2 inches of wisdom know this deep Dhamma?" And the Dhamma, in this context, refers to the profound teachings and the ultimate truth of reality she is currently experiencing.
2 inches of wisdom. That is a brutal psychological strike.
It was very calculated.
And it's a very historically specific insult, isn't it?
It is. It refers to a domestic colloquialism from that era. The implication being that a woman's wisdom only extended as far as the 2 inches of the rice-boiling pot she was supposed to be tending.
Wow. Okay. Designed to be deeply, deeply degrading.
Completely.
But what's truly vital here isn't just the historical flavor of the insult, it's the specific target of the attack.
What's fascinating here is the precise, calculated nature of Mara's strategy. Mara is the ultimate psychological adversary. He is probing for the weakest structural point in her mental armor.
Looking for a chink in the armor.
Exactly. But notice the strategy he avoids. He does not attack her meditation posture. He doesn't attack the mechanics of the Dhamma itself.
But wait, let me stop you right there. Why not?
Well, think about it.
I mean, if Mara's entire goal is to stop her from reaching enlightenment, why not attack the truth of what she's actually doing? Why not say, this meditation is pointless, the Dhamma is a lie?
Because the Dhamma, the ultimate truth of reality she is experiencing in that one-pointed state, has no form.
Oh,
There are no edges, no concepts, no ego for Mara to grab onto. You cannot attack pure, formless awareness any more than you can punch the sky.
punch the sky, right? It just passes right through.
Exactly. So instead, Mara attacks her identity. He goes straight for the heaviest, most complicated piece of mental machinery available. He tries to force the ego trap to spring shut. He says, "You are a woman."
I want to push back on this a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate for a moment.
Sure.
Why is gender the weapon of choice here?
Right.
I mean, if Mara wants to throw her off her game,
Yeah.
why not just attack her intelligence directly? Why not say, you're just not smart enough to understand this complex philosophy?
Right.
Why is "you are a woman" the ultimate psychological attack in this specific moment?
To understand that, we have to look at how deeply ingrained the convention of gender is. According to the text, gender is an incredibly specific, pervasive type of psychological vulnerability.
Pervasive how?
It is categorized as a coarse but powerful ego convention. Think about the human experience. From the literal moment we are born, before we even possess language or complex thought, we are categorized.
Blue blanket or pink blanket?
Exactly. It informs our clothing, our behavior, our societal expectations. It is one of the very first and most fundamental layers upon which we build our entire sense of I am.
It's the foundational bedrock of the identity tower.
Yes.
And if you crack that, the whole thing shakes.
It is the easiest, most slippery point for the mind to grab onto because it is so habitual.
Right?
If Mara attacked her intelligence abstractly, she might easily just brush it off. But by attacking her gender, Mara is trying to activate that latent perception software we discussed earlier.
He's trying to force the mental hardware to wake up, load the complex Santa program, and compel her to think, wait, I am a woman, and my society says I cannot do this.
Precisely. He needs her to take it personally.
Because the moment you take an insult personally, you've accepted the premise that there is a person there to be insulted.
Exactly. The strategy is brilliant in its malice. If she accepts the premise that she is a who, a specific bounded identity, she instantly loses her one-pointedness.
The singularity is broken.
The heavy machinery of comparison, ego, and defense boots up, and the fragile state of deep meditation completely shatters.
He's essentially trying to get her to defend herself.
Yes.
Because if you actively defend your identity against an attack, you are actively maintaining the walls of that identity. You are trapped inside the fortress you are defending.
The act of defending the ego inherently feeds the ego. It validates its existence.
But the incredible part of the story, the reason we are still talking about it thousands of years later, is that she doesn't fall for the trap.
No, she does not.
Soma's takedown of Mara is absolutely legendary.
Yeah.
She responds to him, and keep in mind, she is speaking from this state of deep, concentrated, unified mind.
Right.
She says, what does womanhood matter when the mind is well concentrated? He who sees the Dhamma is neither woman nor man.
It is a stunning, paradigm-shifting response. We must pause and dissect exactly what she is doing here, because her defense is entirely unorthodox.
How so?
Soma's answer is not a socio-political debate.
That is such a crucial point. She's not arguing for equal rights with a personification of illusion.
Right. She isn't shouting back, "I am a woman and I am just as capable, intelligent, and worthy as any man."
It would be a totally valid societal argument, but
Yeah.
not the point here.
Exactly. The text is extremely explicit about this distinction. She is not engaging in worldly discourse or demanding societal validation.
So what is she doing?
Instead, she is making a structural, phenomenological statement about the current architecture of her mind. She is telling Mara, the machinery you are attempting to hack is currently powered down.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's like a hacker trying to send a devastating virus to a computer that is literally unplugged from the wall.
That's a perfect way to look at it. She is simply stating an empirical fact of her present reality. When the mind is profoundly concentrated, the very conditions that generate identity are absent.
She defeats the tempter not by crossing swords with him, but by removing the target entirely.
Mara cannot attack an identity that is not currently being constructed by the mind.
That is just so incredibly profound. She didn't win by fighting back.
Yeah.
She won by revealing that there was no her available to fight.
Yes.
But this raises a massive practical question for me, and I'm sure for anyone listening right now who is thinking about how this actually applies to their own life.
What's the question?
Well, if deep meditation turns off this gender software, what happens when the meditation ends?
Oh.
You can't sit under a tree or in a quiet room with your eyes closed forever. Eventually, you have to stand up, walk to the market, go to work, and interact with the physical world. Does all of that ego, all of that complex identity machinery just come crashing right back online the literal second you open your eyes?
That is the pivotal question of the entire practice, honestly.
I would think so.
And the source material addresses this directly by introducing a vital distinction between two fundamentally different mental processes.
Okay, let's hit them.
We have concentration, which we've been discussing, historically called samadhi.
Samadhi, right.
And then we have insight, which is called vipassana.
Okay, let's unpack these two.
Yeah.
Samadhi and vipassana. How do they handle the concept of identity differently?
Well, concentration, or samadhi, accomplishes exactly what we analyzed with Bhikkhuni Soma. It makes gender quiet.
Quiet.
Yes. By withdrawing from sensory input and achieving one-pointedness, it pacifies the perception. The identity is temporarily left unused. The software is paused.
Okay.
However, your concern is entirely valid. When the meditation session concludes and sensory contact resumes, the underlying conditions that create identity are still present. They've merely lain dormant.
So samadhi provides temporary sanctuary, but it doesn't solve the underlying architecture. It's a pause button.
Exactly. Now, insight, or vipassana, operates on a completely different mechanical level.
How does it differ?
It doesn't just make gender quiet. The text states that insight makes gender transparent.
Transparent. Okay. I really want to visualize this. Let me try an analogy here to see if I'm tracking the difference between quiet and transparent.
I love your analogies. Go ahead.
So samadhi, the deep concentration, is like sitting in a movie theater and hitting pause on a really intense, dramatic movie.
Okay.
While the movie is paused, you don't have to look at the characters, you don't have to follow the stressful plot, you get a much-needed break from the emotional roller coaster. The theater is just quiet.
A perfect cessation of the narrative.
But vipassana, insight, isn't about pausing the film. It's like walking right up to the massive movie screen while the film is still playing.
Oh, interesting.
You get an inch away from the canvas, and suddenly you realize that the characters you've been crying over and stressing about aren't real solid people at all.
They're just light.
Right. They are just tiny, rapidly flashing arrangements of red, green, and blue pixels. Once you truly see the pixels, once you understand the mechanics of the projection, you can walk back to your seat and watch the rest of the movie.
Right.
The movie might be playing loudly, the plot might be dramatic, but you can never, ever be fooled into thinking those pixels are actual flesh and blood people again. You see through the illusion. The narrative becomes transparent.
The pixel analogy is highly effective, but to align it completely with the text, we have to recognize one crucial addition.
Lisha?
In Vipassana, you don't just realize the characters are pixels. You realize that your own mind is the projector.
Whoa.
Insight observes gender and all forms of identity as a constructed arrangement of pixels. It watches the identity arise and fall based on causes and conditions.
So it sees the whole mechanism.
It sees it as something assembled by the mind. And crucially, it realizes it is something that is not under our ultimate control.
Not under our ultimate control.
Right.
I need to pause here because I know I'm going to push back on this, and I'm sure the listener is too.
I expect pushback on this one.
That feels like a radical, almost offensive idea to the modern ego. We feel incredibly in control of who we are. I chose what to wear today. I chose to sit down and record this deep dive. How does the text account for my agency, my free will?
The resistance you are feeling is exactly what the text anticipates.
Naturally.
The framework introduces a concept here called anatta, which translates roughly to not self or non-self.
Non-self.
To explain this, the text points to a famous foundational teaching, the Anattalakkhana Sutta, which poses a devastatingly simple logical argument.
Let's hear it.
Whatever is not under your control is not yourself.
Whatever is not under your control is not yourself. Walk me through the logic of that argument. How does that dismantle my sense of free will regarding my identity?
Let's test the argument against the architecture we've established. Let's start with the physical body, the hardware that gender perception relies on.
Okay.
You say you have control. Can you issue a command to your body to never age? Can you command your cells not to mutate or become sick?
Well, no. Obviously not. I mean, I can eat healthy, but I can't stop time.
You have conditional influence, but not ultimate control.
Right.
The body follows its own biological laws of nature, irrespective of your desires. Now let's look at the mind itself.
Okay, my domain.
Is it? Can you command yourself to never feel a fleeting moment of sadness? Can you command your mind to focus perfectly on a single thought for 10 hours straight without a single distraction arising?
Definitely not. My mind constantly wanders. It brings up memories I didn't ask for.
The text argues that if there were a true, permanent, commanding self inside you, it would be able to exert absolute authority over its domain.
It would just be the boss.
It would simply say, Body do not age, and mind do not suffer. Because neither the body nor the mind is completely under your ultimate control, the text asserts that they cannot be considered a permanent, solid self.
They're just processes.
They are natural, conditional processes happening based on causes.
It's like finding out the CEO of the company doesn't actually exist, and the company is just a complex series of automated algorithms running on their own.
That is exactly it. Now, apply this mechanism to gender.
Okay.
Gender is a construct that relies entirely on this uncontrollable physical body and this uncontrollable conditioned mind. When insight, or vipassana, closely observes the pixels of identity, it realizes this perception is a constructed phenomenon.
It's automated.
It happens automatically based on social conditioning, biological input, and memory. It arises when the conditions are right, and it ceases when they aren't.
So it's not a fixed thing.
Therefore, it is not a permanent, unchangeable, sovereign me.
So bringing it back to the movie theater. Because insight reveals that the identity is fundamentally constructed and ultimately uncontrollable, just a projection of pixels.
Right.
Even when the practitioner gets up from their meditation cushion and leaves the quiet theater, gender never returns as a definitive, absolute self.
Never.
They still navigate the physical world, they still interact with the movie of society, but the deep-seated illusion that the movie is absolute reality is broken forever.
The shift in mental architecture is permanent. It rewires how the mind interacts with its own self-image in daily life.
That is massive.
Consider the psychological difference here. Temporarily suppressing your ego through willpower is exhausting and ultimately destined to fail when you get tired.
You can't hold your breath forever.
Exactly. Permanently seeing through the illusion of the ego, understanding its conditional nature, is deeply liberating.
That completely flips the script. The goal isn't the violent act of saying, I need to destroy my ego. The goal is the quiet act of saying, I just need to clearly see how my ego is manufactured.
It is the clarity of insight that prepares the mind for the most profound stages detailed in the source material.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text doesn't stop at just sitting in meditation, calming the mind, and observing the pixels.
We're going deeper.
We are now diving into the absolute deep end of this philosophical and psychological framework. We are moving into the formless realms, the arupa jhanas.
This is where the architecture of the mind becomes truly alien to our normal, everyday conscious experience.
Give me some context.
Up until now, we've discussed a mind that is either quieted from sensory input or a mind that sees the structural nature of reality clearly. But in the formless jhanas, practitioners step beyond the perception of the physical body entirely. The mind essentially strips away the conventional coordinates of reality itself.
Okay, strips away the conventional coordinates of reality. How does the text even begin to describe this state? Because this sounds intense, almost overwhelmingly abstract.
To ground this, we must first look at how the text defines gender at this incredibly deep level. It categorizes gender and all identity, really, as a fetter to existence, or the Pali term bhava.
A fetter, like a chain, a shackle, or an anchor.
A subtle, deeply embedded tie that binds the mind to the continuous cycle of existence and suffering.
Okay.
The text explains that gender operates in tandem with sensual craving and the conceit of I am. Together, these cognitive forces keep the mind constantly leaning forward.
Leaning forward.
Perpetually wanting to exist, wanting to be something, wanting to experience the world through a specific lens.
That actually makes perfect sense. If you firmly believe you have a specific identity, you inherently need a world for that identity to operate in.
You need a stage.
You need an environment, a stage to play the role of you.
The mind constantly generates a world to validate its identity. But in the formless realms, there is a radical architectural shift.
Why haven't?
The mechanics of this rely on a foundational concept called dependent origination.
Sounds heavy.
I will explain it without getting bogged down in the heavy academic jargon.
Please do.
Dependent origination is essentially the intricate law of cause and effect within the mind. It dictates that phenomena only arise and exist because they have a base or underlying conditions supporting them.
Like a fire. A fire doesn't just exist independently out of nowhere.
Right.
It needs oxygen, it needs fuel like wood, and it needs an initial spark. If you remove the wood, the fire ceases to exist.
That is the exact mechanism. So as we established in our earlier analysis, the concept of gender requires specific conditions to exist in the mind.
Remind me what those are.
A physical body to reference, the faculty of perception to label it, the conceit of ego to claim it and craving to maintain it.
The fuel for the fire.
But in the formless jhanas, the mind completely and utterly withdraws from the perception of physical form. It moves past it.
Past form entirely.
It enters states described as infinite space or infinite consciousness or even the realm of nothingness. In these profound states, there is zero physical form to define. There is no perception dividing the universe into this over here and that over there.
Everything is just unified.
And crucially, there is no identity to compare against anything else.
Because if your awareness has expanded to become infinite space, there's literally no boundary. Who are you comparing yourself to if everything is just an unbroken expanse of space?
Exactly. The mind in this state simply does not supply the necessary conditions for identity to arise.
It removes the base.
Therefore, it's not that the advanced meditator is sitting there trying really hard not to think about their gender or their name.
Sweating on the cushion.
Right. It's that there is literally no structural room within that mental state for the concept to exist. The source text states this elegantly. When not clinging to form, one does not stand in form.
So the fire of identity goes out simply because the mind has entered a room where there is no oxygen.
The conditions are systematically removed.
Okay, I have to jump in here and speak for you, the listener, because I know exactly what some of you might be thinking as we discuss infinite space and the cessation of identity.
I'm curious.
This all sounds philosophically fascinating, sure, but it also might sound a bit terrifying to the modern ear.
Terrifying. What is the root of that fear?
Well, let's be honest, we love our identities.
Yeah.
Especially in our current era.
That's true.
We spend our entire lives building them, discovering them, curating them, and fighting fiercely for them. Our identities are how we express our individuality, how we find our communities, how we navigate relationships.
They are very important tools.
The idea of purposely entering a psychological state where your identity has absolutely no room to exist, doesn't this sound like we are erasing our humanity?
I see where you're going with this.
Why would someone dedicate their life to experiencing a state where they are literally unformed? Isn't this just a very elaborate, philosophical way of becoming nothing?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the text's ultimate goal, it is vital to understand that the source material explicitly anticipates and addresses this very fear.
Oh, it does?
Yes. It states very clearly that this process is not a rejection of the physical body. It is not an erasure of one's humanity, and it is certainly not a nihilistic escape from the world.
Okay, then what is it?
Yeah.
Because from the outside, stripping away reality sounds a lot like deleting the self.
It feels like deletion only to the ego, because the ego's singular, desperate job is to ensure its own continued existence.
Self-preservation.
But from the perspective of the deeper, unconditioned mind, it is the experience of pure knowing. Consider the sheer burden of maintaining an identity.
There's a lot of work.
Even a beloved, joyful identity requires constant maintenance. It requires defense against insult. It requires continuous, exhausting negotiation with the outside world.
Every single day.
The text describes this formless state not as a tragic loss of self, but as a profound, unimaginable relief. It is the realization that your baseline consciousness does not need to be weighed down by labels, concepts, or boundaries in order to exist and be aware.
Ah. I see the distinction. It's the massive difference between thinking I am nothing and realizing I don't need to be something specific in order to be aware.
It is the ultimate freedom from identity rather than freedom of identity.
Wait, expand on that. Freedom from versus freedom of?
Freedom of identity is what we strive for in a just society. The right to exist as who we are without oppression or prejudice.
Absolutely essential.
That is vital on a conventional level. But freedom from identity is a profound spiritual and psychological realization.
Okay.
It is discovering a foundational layer of your consciousness that is completely untouchable by society, by Mara, by any label, praise, or criticism whatsoever. It establishes an impenetrable internal sanctuary.
An internal sanctuary. That completely shifts the perspective from fear to liberation.
It changes everything.
It's not about taking a sledgehammer and destroying the house you spent your life building. It's realizing that you are actually the vast sky above the house.
Beautifully put.
You can always go inside the house when it rains, you can decorate the house, but you aren't trapped within its walls. You are the sky.
That captures the essence perfectly. And that realization leads us directly into the final and perhaps most nuanced question posed by this entire textual framework. What is the absolute endgame of this practice?
Right. Because unless you are a hermit living in a remote cave, You can't stay in a state of infinite space forever.
You have to eat. You have to participate.
What happens to a fully enlightened person, what the source text calls an arahant, when they finally open their eyes, walk out of the forest, and have to interact with the messy, form-filled real world?
The text makes a razor-sharp, almost surgical distinction here between two phrases. It distinguishes between not clinging to gender and no gender.
Okay, not clinging to gender versus no gender. On the surface, those sound practically identical. What is the subtle psychological difference?
It all comes down to the subject. Who is doing the action?
Who's doing the action?
Okay, if you walk around society saying, I do not cling to my gender, I am highly evolved and above such petty labels, what are you actually doing within your mind?
You're bragging.
Exactly.
We're just creating a brand new, slightly more arrogant identity as the super enlightened spiritual person who doesn't care about labels.
That is exactly the trap. There is still a massive I doing the non-clinging. There is still a subject claiming ownership of the experience.
A spiritual ego.
It is a very subtle, very tricky evolution of the ego. The text points out that as long as there is an I actively not clinging, there is still a clinger present in the mental architecture.
The ego just changed its clothes.
Precisely.
So what does no gender mean in the ultimate structural sense?
When insight is fully perfected, when the psychological path described in the text is completed, it's not that the concept of gender is violently extinguished. It's that the clinger is extinguished. The very cognitive mechanism that claims ownership over the experience, the factory that produces the I am, is permanently dismantled.
So an enlightened person, an arahant, they still have a gender conventionally, right? They don't become invisible blobs floating through the town square.
Of course they don't. Arahants still live in the physical world. They inhabit male or female bodies. In the historical texts, they use the pronouns monk or nun, bhikkhu or bhikkhuni.
They use worldly conventions perfectly.
Perfectly. They don't run around correcting everyone's grammar, refusing to answer to their names, or acting like aliens who don't understand human society.
So if their external behavior looks relatively normal, how is their internal experience fundamentally different from ours if they're using the same words and living in the same bodies?
This is where we must unpack the crucial philosophical difference between what the text calls conventional truth, or sammuti, and ultimate truth, or paramatha.
Conventional truth versus ultimate truth. Let's break down how those two operate simultaneously.
Conventional truth is the agreed-upon language of the world. A table is a table. A man is a man. A woman is a woman.
Left is left and right is right.
Exactly. It is an absolutely necessary framework for society to function and for human beings to communicate.
Right, without it, we couldn't build a house or cross the street.
But ultimate truth is the structural, molecular reality underneath those agreements. In ultimate truth, the Dhamma, pure insight, and nirvana have no gender. They have no boundaries. Gender is purely a language of the conventional world.
I think I need another analogy to really ground this dual reality for the listener.
Go ahead. How would you frame it?
Okay, think about an enlightened person using gender pronouns exactly like a person using a map to navigate a massive, bustling city like New York or London.
A map.
You use the map to get around.
Yeah.
You say to your friend, turn left at Fifth Avenue. You communicate with other people using the specific names printed on the map.
Yeah.
But you never, ever suffer under the delusion that the flimsy piece of paper in your hand is the actual hard concrete of the city. You know the map is just a tool. It's a useful convention.
Let's take that analogy further to highlight the psychological freedom.
Yeah, please.
Imagine someone who is so convinced the map is the ultimate reality that when someone accidentally spills coffee on the map, they panic, genuinely believing the actual city blocks are flooding.
That sounds crazy, but that is exactly what we do.
That is what we do with our identities. When someone insults our gender, our status, or our label, we feel a visceral existential threat, as if our actual concrete existence is crumbling.
Wow.
The arahant doesn't panic about the coffee on the map. The text literally states, the one who knows convention as convention is not lost in convention.
They use the map perfectly to navigate, but they don't live inside it.
Nirvana is described in these texts as unsupported.
Unsupported.
It is a state of being that relies on absolutely nothing. No conditions, no form, no perception. When the deepest layer of the mind reaches the unsupported, things that require support to exist, like gender, like complex identity, like the map itself, fall completely silent in the internal experience.
And this brings us beautifully, full circle, back to Bhikkhuni Soma, facing down the demon Mara.
It does.
Her quote, the one that defeated the ultimate tempter, actually operates perfectly on all three levels of practice we've analyzed today.
Let's synthesize the entire journey by running Soma's quote through the three architectural levels. Her quote was, "What does womanhood matter? He who sees the Dhamma is neither woman nor man."
Right. Level 1 is the beginner, the level of deep concentration or samadhi.
Right.
At this level, Soma's quote means the mind is quiet. It is withdrawn from the physical body, the sensory ports are closed, and the complex perception of gender is simply paused. It's not loading.
The movie is paused. Level 2 is the intermediate, the level of insight or vipassana. Here, Soma's quote takes on a deeper meaning. The mind sees that the concept of gender is transparent. It recognizes it as a constructed phenomenon. It realizes it is not under ultimate control, and therefore it sees that it is not a permanent self.
Walking up to this screen and seeing the pixels.
Exactly. And finally, level 3 is the highest, the level of the fully realized path, the arahant.
The ultimate truth.
At this level, Soma's quote means there is simply no who left to be a gender. The cognitive mechanism of the clinger is permanently dismantled. The map is fully recognized as just paper.
So what does this all mean? We've gone from the physical hardware of the body to the complex software of perception.
It's been a journey.
We watched an ancient nun psychologically dismantle the personification of ego by unplugging her own identity. We paused the movie of reality, we walked up and examined the pixels of our construction, and finally, we look at how an enlightened mind uses the map of identity without ever getting lost in the city streets.
It is a remarkable, rigorous journey through the architecture of the mind.
The source text shows us something so deeply liberating. It shows us that gender, and by extension, our entire overarching identity, isn't something that needs to be violently destroyed or passionately, exhaustingly defended in the realm of the deep mind.
No, it's not a war.
It is simply something that, at the absolute highest levels of human consciousness, is no longer structurally necessary. It just runs out of fuel.
This raises an important point, or rather, it answers a beautiful underlying question about human nature.
What's that?
This deep structural reality is exactly why practitioners from thousands of years ago in ancient India, sitting under trees in a vastly different world, and practitioners today in the modern era, sitting in living rooms or urban meditation centers, report the exact same formless sensation without ever speaking to each other.
The exact same experience.
They report the formless mind, the distinct absence of gender, not because they share a learned cultural belief system, but because the underlying biological and phenomenological architecture of the human mind is universal.
It's the same machine.
When you turn off the same sensory switches, the machine enters the same state, regardless of the century or the society.
That structural universality is just awe-inspiring. It connects all of us on a fundamental level, far beneath language, beneath cultural divides, and beneath the labels we wear so heavily.
It really does.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. Something to explore on your own as you start away from this and go about the rest of your day.
A takeaway.
We started by imagining waking up in a perfectly quiet room, stripped of all identity, feeling nothing but profound peace. The text today suggests that our deepest, most concentrated, and most peaceful state of mind naturally, effortlessly sheds all identity and gender.
It's at the baseline.
So consider the implications for your own life. What does that say about the enormous, staggering amount of mental energy we spend protecting, projecting, and agonizing over our identities in our daily waking lives?
That's a heavy burden.
If ultimate freedom is the realization that you don't need a label to exist and be whole, what label are you clinging to right now that is causing you unnecessary weight? What part of your map are you frantically mistaking for the actual concrete of the world?
It's a line of questioning that has the power to change how you experience every single interaction you have moving forward.
Truly.
It encourages you to step back, observe the map in your hands, and realize the immense, unburdened freedom of the sky above it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us as we unpack this incredible text. Keep questioning, keep exploring the architecture of your own mind, and we'll see you next time as we take another deep dive into the fascinating depths of human knowledge.